Chapter 1. A Most Curious Invitation. It was in the spring of 1923 that the case of the vault of Rue de la Paix first came to the attention of Hercule Poirot, and, by extension, to me. At the time, we were in Paris, ostensibly for a period of rest. Poirot had taken it upon himself to inspect the Louvre for the 1000th time, mon ami, while I, having little taste for art galleries, preferred the more invigorating occupation of strolling the boulevards and admiring the well-dressed passers-by. We had been staying at the Hotel Meurice, where Poirot, ever fond of luxury and symmetry, was thoroughly enamored of the gilt mirrors and heavy drapery. It was there, on a grey April morning, that the first threads of the affair began to unwind. Poirot was buttering a croissant with his usual precision when a small envelope was brought to our table by the concierge. "Ah, une lettre pour moi," he said, opening it with delicate fingers. "From an old acquaintance, it seems. Inspector Giraud." I raised my eyebrows. I had not forgotten Inspector Giraud of the French Sûreté, a man with little regard for the little grey cells, and even less for Poirot's moustache. "What does the good inspector want?" Poirot read the letter carefully, then set it aside with a little sigh. "It seems," he said, "that our Giraud finds himself perplexed. A bank in the Rue de la Paix has been relieved of a considerable sum, nearly 8 million francs in gold, and there is not so much as a broken lock to show for it." "A robbery?" I asked, suddenly alert. "Mais oui, and not just any robbery. A theft of distinction, mon ami. A vault emptied during the night, under the very noses of guards, in a building with no signs of forced entry. Très intéressant, n'est-ce pas?" "Sounds rather like a stage trick," I said, "or something out of a penny thriller." Poirot gave me a sharp glance. "Exactly. And that is why Giraud, though he does not say it aloud, suspects a certain voleur de qualité, a gentleman thief." I leaned forward. "A Raffles type, eh?" No, Mr. Raffles is an amateur. This is the work, I suspect, of someone with method, intelligence, finesse." "And Giraud wants your help?" "Reluctantly, yes," Poirot smirked. "And so, mon ami, we shall oblige him. There is a train to the 8th arrondissement in 40 minutes. I suggest you finish your café au lait quickly." We caught the mid-morning train to the 8th arrondissement. The carriages were surprisingly empty for that time of day, which suited Poirot well. He took a window seat and immediately arranged his gloves and handkerchief in a neat stack beside him. I unfolded Le Figaro and began browsing the headlines. A brief article on the 4th page caught my eye. "Listen to this," I said. "Mystery robbery baffles Paris police. Vault emptied in the heart of city without a trace." It says here the guards claim to have heard a faint humming sound during the night, like machinery, but thought nothing of it. The vault was discovered open the next morning, contents gone. "Tiens," Poirot leaned in. "Machinery, that is interesting. And get this, the floor of the vault was wet, as though someone had recently washed it." Poirot tapped his fingers together. "Water, machinery, a humming sound. Perhaps a tunnel, Hastings. There are old catacombs and drainage passages under Paris. Even Napoleon used them." "A tunnel, of course, but wouldn't someone have heard the digging?" "Not if the tunnel already existed," Poirot said. "It is easier to repurpose than to create, and far less noisy." I mused on that while the train trundled past rows of shuttered apartment windows and narrow cafes. The city's spring bloom pressed against the glass. Poirot reached into his pocket and produced a folded sheet of graph paper. He had already begun sketching a layout of what he imagined the bank's vault to look like. "The question," he said, "is not only how the vault was emptied, but why now? Timing, Hastings. It is always the key. Why not a week earlier? Why not next month? Something has changed." We arrived at the bank shortly before noon. The building, a proud stone edifice with a domed roof and high iron gates, was cordoned off with police tape. A pair of gendarmes stood on duty at the steps. Inside, the lobby was silent and austere. polished marble floors, ornate brass lamps, and a faint lingering smell of lavender polish. We were met by Inspector Giraud himself, still lean, sharp-eyed, and with that perpetual air of mild disdain that seemed to follow him like pipe smoke. "Poirot," he said with a thin smile, extending a gloved hand, "I see you are still alive." "And you, Giraud," Poirot replied cheerfully. "Still pretending to be clever, I see." Their rivalry was long-standing and always faintly ridiculous, but I was relieved that today, at least, it remained civil. "I suppose you've come to show us how to solve the case with your little grey cells," Giraud said, as he led us down a narrow stairway behind a locked iron door. "But of course," Poirot replied modestly. "And with your generous cooperation, naturally." The vault itself was a massive chamber of reinforced steel and cement, still reeking faintly of damp earth. The air was cool and slightly musty. As we entered, Giraud gestured toward the rear wall. "There. That's where we believe the thieves came through. A false panel, now removed. It led into an old maintenance tunnel we didn't even know existed. The opening had been hastily boarded up for inspection, but not before photographs had been taken." "No footprints," Giraud said. "The tunnel floor was wiped clean. The thieves knew exactly what they were doing." Poirot examined the chamber slowly, his head tilted slightly to the right, like a bird regarding an insect. "And no noise, no vibration, no alarms triggered?" "Nothing," said Giraud. "Nothing," said Giraud, "except the humming noise the guards heard, which they didn't report until the next morning. Too late." Poirot frowned. "There are thieves who act from opportunity, and then there are those who act from invitation." Giraud snorted. "You think someone inside helped them?" Poirot turned to him with an expression of quiet certainty. "I think, Giraud, that someone opened the door, metaphorically, if not literally." The three of us stood in silence for a moment, listening to the faint echo of our own footsteps in the empty vault. There was something deeply satisfying about being swept into mystery again, especially in the company of Hercule Poirot. I had no inkling then that this case would lead us through the bowels of Paris, into the world of bohemian criminals and vanished tunnels, and bring us face to face with a thief who could match wits with the great detective himself. But I get ahead of myself. It began with a vault, a tunnel, and a name whispered in the shadowed corners of Montmartre. Le Fantôme Doré. The Golden Ghost. Chapter 2. The Legend of the Golden Ghost. It was later that same afternoon, as a pale grey settled over Paris, that Poirot and I made our way through the narrow streets near the Palais de Justice. Inspector Giraud had requested a private meeting, something so out of character that Poirot had raised both eyebrows and then immediately polished his cane. "I told you, Hastings," he said with a satisfied little nod. "The wolf who howls loudest is often the one with frost on his paws." The Café de l'Horloge sat just opposite the Seine, discreet and modest, with fogged windows and a faint smell of roasted chicory. We were led upstairs to a private salon where Giraud sat waiting, alone, his trench coat still damp from the rain. He looked up, unsmiling. "Poirot, Hastings." Giraud lit a cigarette with deliberate slowness and slid a folder across the table. There were typed pages, press clippings, and a few handwritten notes in the Sûreté's code. "You know the name they're whispering," Giraud said. "Golden Ghost. Le Fantôme Doré." Poirot opened the folder and read with interest. "I thought it was only a story," I ventured. "A kind of international myth." "So did I," said Giraud darkly, "until last night." As Giraud spoke, the figure of the Golden Ghost took form, not from a single image, but from smoke and rumor stitched together by whispers that drifted through embassies and criminal circles alike. "They say he first appeared in Vienna," Giraud began. 1910. The Austro-Hungarian State Bank. Vault opened from below, 4 hours before dawn. The alarm system was intact. The guards heard nothing. When they checked, 100,000 krone in gold bonds were gone. No prints, no tools left behind. Only a golden button on the floor. Poirot nodded. And then Milan, Zurich, and Munich. Yes, Giraud confirmed. Always the same pattern. A bank or private vault with exceptional security. A flawless escape. No violence, no trace. And in each case, left behind something meaningless but theatrical. A gold button, a coin. Once even a feather dipped in gold paint. I couldn't help but be fascinated. And no one ever saw him? Not once, Giraud said. Some said he was an Englishman, others a Russian exile. One rumor claimed he was a retired stage magician. Another said he was an architect, used blueprints, dug tunnels. Then, in 1913, he vanished, just before the war. Poirot looked up, his fingers tented. And now, after 10 years, he returns. Why? That's what I want to know. Giraud tapped the top sheet in the folder. The Banque Générale vault was struck last night. The guards swear it was secure at close of business. No sign of break-in at the front. On inspection, as you might recall, we discovered the back wall, reinforced steel, had been breached. Not blasted. Removed. Comment? Poirot leaned forward. It was cut cleanly from the inside of the adjoining cellar. A wine merchant's cellar recently rented 2 weeks before the robbery, under the name Louis Durand. Poirot blinked slowly. A name without history. Exactly, Giraud said. Forged papers, all in order. Passport checked at Calais. Durand arrived from London a fortnight ago. And this, Poirot said, you did not wish to share with your colleagues? They'll laugh, Giraud snapped. They already are, ghost stories. But this was no ordinary theft. He emptied the entire vault. He knew the guard rotation. He installed a tunnel brace without anyone noticing. It's too perfect. And yet, said Poirot softly, he did not leave his usual token. Giraud hesitated. No, but this was found, stuck behind a loose brick, probably unintentionally. He removed a small envelope from his coat pocket. Inside was a polished antique gold coin, a French 20-franc piece bearing the profile of Napoleon III. Poirot took it delicately in his gloved fingers. A coin from 1864, he murmured. Immaculate condition. Collectors say it's common, but there's something odd. It was freshly cleaned, no dust, as if placed. To be found. Poirot's eyes glowed. Mais bien sûr, he's returned, and he wants an audience. We left the café as dusk fell, the gaslights flickering in the mist. Across the Seine, Notre Dame loomed like a silent judge. As we walked, I asked Poirot, "Do you really believe it's him? The golden ghost?" Poirot adjusted his hat. "Yes, Hastings. It is not merely the precision. It is the style, the restraint, the message." He paused. "The ghost is not just robbing banks. He is reclaiming his myth." Chapter 3. A Gloved Hand in the Shadows. The following morning I awoke to find Poirot already seated by the window, his moustaches impeccable and his breakfast untouched. He was reading Le Matin, which had devoted the entire front page to the Banque Générale robbery, now being called, with the breathless drama of the French press, le vol du siècle, the theft of the century. "They always overstate, the journalists," Poirot said, folding the paper precisely. "But in this case, they may not be far wrong." I poured myself some coffee and glanced at the article. Beneath a sensational headline, it breathlessly detailed the phantom-like disappearance of 8 million francs in gold. Speculation was rife. Anarchists, German agents, even a secret society of exiled Russian aristocrats. "Nothing about the cellar?" I asked. Poirot shook his head. "No, the police have kept that detail to themselves." He rose, slipping on his gloves. "Come, let us visit our wine merchant." He rose, slipping on his gloves. "Come, let us visit our wine merchant." The wine merchant's shop was on a narrow side street a few blocks from the bank. A tidy, unimposing facade with freshly painted signage, Maison Durante, Vins et Liqueurs. It was locked, of course, and shuttered. A uniformed officer stood outside, who recognized Poirot immediately and let us through. Inside, the shop was pristine, too pristine. No scuffs, no dust, no crates, no bottles. A single empty shelf stood at the back. Below, a trapdoor. We descended into the cellar. It was damp and narrow, the stone walls freshly mortared in places. The floor was disturbed, uneven, patched. At the far end, a square panel of steel leaned against the wall, about 2 meters wide. Giraud was already there with 2 detectives, directing them to sketch and measure. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he said, not unkindly, "here to admire the handiwork?" "Indeed, it is elegant, unhurried." Giraud nodded grimly. The soil was removed and replaced over several nights. Wooden supports, exact dimensions, not a single misstep. He gestured to the steel panel. "That's part of the vault's back wall, cut clean from the other side. They say it would take a team of workers and heavy tools days to do it." He managed it in silence. Poirot knelt beside the cut. His gloved finger traced the seam. No burrs. This was done with care. Perhaps a saw, jeweler's quality, or acid. "We're checking residue," Giraud said. "And the tunnel?" "Collapsed it behind him, intentionally. Sealed the outer wall with brick and fresh mortar. Disguised it as part of the shop's foundation. We'd have missed it if not for a hollow sound when the constable tapped his boot." Poirot stood slowly. "He is sending a message." Giraud snorted. "That he's clever?" Poirot smiled faintly. "That he is back." That evening, over dinner at a quiet bistro, Poirot finally answered the question that had been turning in my mind all day. "Do you believe," I asked, "that it was truly the Golden Ghost?" Poirot dabbed his mouth delicately. "The style is unmistakable, the restraint, the theatre. But it is not merely the method that speaks. It is the return." He leaned forward. "There is a pattern in his past, Hastings. Vienna, Zurich, Milan. Always neutral cities, always large banks with international clients, and always the theft occurs at a moment of political unease. In Vienna, 1909, after the annexation of Bosnia. Zurich, 1911, just before the anarchist bombing. Milan, 1913, amidst strikes and arrests. And now, in 1923, with the franc weakened and reparations debates raging after Versailles, Paris is ripe for his performance." I frowned. "So you believe he acts with a political motive?" Poirot shook his head. No, not political, symbolic. He chooses moments of tension when attention is divided. He does not merely steal, he performs. He inserts himself into the story of the time. "And now?" "Now," Poirot said softly, "he returns to Paris. The city is restless, and into that atmosphere he steps once more onto the stage." He tapped his teacup. "And yet—" "Yes?" "He is not finished." I looked at him, puzzled. "Why do you say that, Poirot?" "The robbery was perfect. No one caught him. Why do you think he'll strike again?" Poirot smiled as if he were amused by the question itself. "Because, Hastings, the ghost does not merely steal money. He steals attention, and the story. This robbery, magnificent as it is, carries a message, but the message is incomplete." I stared at him. "Incomplete?" "Yes. Consider the coin found behind the loose brick, the 1864 Napoleon gold piece. It was too carefully placed to be accidental. If it were merely a calling card, why not leave it plainly on the vault floor as before? Why hide it?" Poirot rose and with a flourish removed his coat. "The placement tells me the ghost wants to be found, but only by those who look closely. Like us, Hastings." He pointed to the newspaper article on the table. "The headlines scream of a phantom who vanished with millions, but we know the vault was entered not by force but by precision tunneling. This tells me he plans something more, a second act. Perhaps an even greater spectacle. The legend must grow." I shook my head, impressed but wary. "You think he's daring the police, daring you, to catch him?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Exactly. He wants the world to watch his performance, and this time he is not content with mere theft." Just as we were settling back into the hotel, a discreet knock interrupted us. A boy entered, carrying a sealed envelope with no return address. Poirot took it and opened carefully. Inside was a single slip of fine cream paper, written in flowing golden ink. "For those who admire finesse, a second curtain must fall. Look where shadows keep their ledgers, and the gloved hand leaves no call." Poirot's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "A riddle, Hastings. Our ghost wishes us to follow. The game is far from over." Chapter 4. The Second Curtain. The morning air in Paris was crisp, yet heavy with an unspoken tension, as if the city itself were holding its breath. We left our modest hotel and made our way toward the Archives Nationales, a formidable structure nestled among the grand Haussmannian buildings on Rue des Francs Bourgeois. The archives were exactly as one might expect, an imposing edifice of dark stone and wrought iron, flanked by weathered statues of justice and history. Inside, the dim, quiet halls reeked of aged parchment and dust, a scent I had come to associate with the slow passage of time and secrets buried deep. Poirot moved with purpose, his keen eyes scanning the rows of ancient ledgers and journals, as though he could read the stories between the faded lines of ink. "Ah, Hastings," he said with a flourish, "here we are in the heart of Parisian memory. Now, if our friend, the Golden Ghost, wishes us to look where shadows keep their ledgers, we must look in the records of commerce and finance. The shadows, after all, hide many truths." We set to work. Hours passed as we leafed through tomes that detailed the commerce of old banks, notaries' sales of properties, and transfer of assets. My fingers grew stiff, and my eyes tired from the small print, but Poirot's attention never wavered. At last, Poirot paused and pointed at a ledger with a precise finger. "Hastings, observe this entry." It was a sale from 1913, an obscure wine merchant's cellar on Rue de la Paix. The purchaser, wine merchant's cellar on Rue de la Paix. The purchaser, a man named Louis Durand. The handwriting was elegant, but worn with time. "What's unusual about that?" I asked. Poirot tapped the margin where a note was scribbled. "Purchase made with bearer bonds, serial numbers matching stolen cash from Zurich, 1911. My eyes widened. "You mean Durand paid for the cellar using stolen bonds? From the Golden Ghost's previous heist?" "Exactement." Poirot smiled faintly. "This confirms the legend. Durand is not simply a businessman, nor just the owner of this wine shop. He is the man behind the mask, or at least deeply connected to our elusive friend." He looked up from the ledger with a grave expression. "The Golden Ghost does not work alone. His network spans cities, Vienna, Zurich, Milan, and now Paris. Each theft is a thread woven into a grand tapestry. And this cellar, the very site of our recent investigation, has been part of his plan for over a decade." The implications sank into me slowly. "So this was no spur-of-the-moment robbery," I said, "but a carefully laid scheme, years in the making." Poirot nodded. Just then, a brisk knock interrupted our quiet study. We turned to find Inspector Giraud, looking somewhat harried but alert. "Gentlemen," he said, "we have discovered activity at an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Guards reported odd noises and shadows moving after hours. It's the perfect place for a second act." Poirot's eyes sparkled with excitement. "The Golden Ghost calls us to follow." The warehouse stood like a monolith at the river's edge, its great iron girders jutting into the night like the ribs of some long-dead beast. The fog that clung to the Seine had crept inland, wrapping the old structure in a shroud of pale grey. From the outside, it appeared derelict, just another forgotten relic of a busier century. But there was something unnatural in its stillness, a kind of silence that listened back. We arrived shortly after dusk, lanterns in hand. Giraud led the way, his long coat brushing the damp stones as he stepped over a broken chain-link gate. Two uniformed officers followed behind us with rifles, their eyes darting nervously into the gloom. "This place was shuttered in 1914, Giraud said, his voice clipped, "used briefly for storing war rations, then nothing, until last night, when a dock worker claimed he saw lights moving inside." We crossed the threshold. The interior swallowed our lantern glow greedily. Crates, ropes, and rusted winches littered the space, draped in cobwebs like forgotten stage props. The air was thick with mildew and the stale scent of rotting wood. Poirot moved with care, his patent leather shoes making the faintest of sounds. He stopped frequently, stooping to examine a boot print in the dust or the scuff of metal on wood. He said nothing at first, but I could see his mind whirring behind those sharp green eyes. At the far wall, Giraud pointed toward a broken crate. "This was moved recently. We found a torn ledger inside, old accounts from a now-defunct import firm. Probably nothing." Poirot glanced at it, then at the wall behind. His eyes narrowed. "Not nothing," he murmured. "A veil, perhaps, left just transparent enough to tease the viewer." He approached the crate and ran his fingers lightly along the dust. "The ghost is meticulous. If he entered here, he left no trace unintentionally. These ledgers, they're not just cover. They are part of a story." "And what story is that?" Giraud asked, with more skepticism than curiosity. Poirot turned to face us. "He is recreating something, not merely hiding. There is an aesthetic here, a kind of choreography. The coin in the cellar was the first step. This warehouse is the second. The ghost does not vanish. He composes silence, and he leaves these spaces behind like movements in a sonata." It was then that Poirot crouched and picked something up from the floor, a scrap of black silk, fine as mist and delicately stitched. He held it between gloved fingers and showed it to us. "A glove," Giraud said flatly. "Women's, by the look of it." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but not worn. Placed, presented. Look, no dirt on the fingertips. It has not been dragged or dropped. It was laid deliberately, where it would not be noticed by the untrained eye. He wanted me to find it." I stepped closer, the atmosphere pricking the hairs on my neck. "So this is another invitation?" "Yes," Poirot replied. "A continuation. He is saying, 'Come further. You have seen my hand. Now try to read my mind.'" Just then, one of the officers called out from the rear of the warehouse, "Inspecteur, we found something. A passage beneath the floor." We hurried over. A loose panel had been pried away, revealing a narrow stair descending into darkness. "Another tunnel?" I asked. Poirot didn't answer immediately. He stared down into the abyss, and then, almost too softly to hear, he said, "No, a prologue." The stairs descended sharply into cold earth, the light from our lanterns swallowed by the black. The tunnel was narrow, lined with crumbling brick and the old bones of forgotten commerce, rusted rails once used for trolleys, broken crates, the occasional glint of something metallic embedded in the grime. We descended in silence, each footstep muffled as if even sound dared not disturb this place. The air was damp and close, thick with the scent of soil and mold. Somewhere ahead, water dripped rhythmically like the ticking of a clock. We continued until the corridor ended at what appeared to be a reinforced iron door, its hinges modern, oiled. It was unlocked. Inside, the room was bare, save for a single chair, a gas lamp affixed to the wall, and a folded sheet of paper on the ground. No safe, no stolen treasure, No tools or blueprints, just silence and an unsettling sense of intent. Poirot moved forward and picked up the note delicately, holding it by the corners. Giraud leaned over his shoulder, eyebrows arched in skepticism. "A message?" he asked. "Let me see." Poirot's eyes scanned the page, but he didn't hand it over immediately. His lips pressed into a thoughtful line. Then he turned and passed it to me. The paper was thick and expensive, unlined, the handwriting neat and fluid, unmistakably French. "Bravo, Monsieur Poirot. Très bien. Now, let us see how well you read music when the tempo rises." Giraud gave a soft scoff. "He fancies himself a poet now, does he? What tempo? What music?" "This is theatre," Poirot corrected him gently. "No, Monsieur Giraud, not theatre. Composition. Every action is measured, every silence intentional." The two officers standing by the door shifted uncomfortably. Two officers standing by the door shifted uncomfortably, one casting a glance toward the dark stairwell behind us. Poirot took a slow step back and turned a full circle in the center of the room. "Do you not see it?" he said, mostly to himself. "This is not a random hideout, not merely a passage or a refuge. It is a movement in a larger work." "A larger what, exactly?" Giraud asked impatiently. Poirot gestured lightly toward the worn bricks, the solitary chair, the absence of debris or clutter. "A fugue, perhaps, a piece of music with layered voices, or a puzzle box built in stone. This room is deliberate, like the coin in the cellar, like the glove." Giraud's mouth twisted. "So the thief leaves us flourishes now. Shall we clap for him?" Poirot's tone sharpened ever so slightly. "He does not seek applause, only understanding, from one mind in particular." There was a pause. "We are not chasing a man," Poirot continued, more softly now. "We are walking through a composition written in time, hidden in dust and shadow, and we are only in the second movement." He turned to me, and his expression held a strange gleam. Not triumph, but curiosity sharpened into resolve. "The ghost is not done. This is not his escape, it is his signal." He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his coat. "And now he waits to see if I can keep pace." We ascended the narrow steps in silence, Giraud ahead of us, muttering about games and delusions, the officers behind, rifles in hand but minds adrift. Outside, the river fog had thickened, and the night had taken on the peculiar stillness of a paused breath. I glanced back at the open hatch as the last of us emerged. For the first time I felt we were not hunting the golden ghost at all. We were following his rhythm. Chapter 5. The Midnight Encounter. The city had long since succumbed to the quiet hush of night when the summons arrived, delivered by a courier whose face was obscured beneath a low hat and vanished as swiftly as he appeared. Poirot regarded the sealed envelope with a gaze both inscrutable and alive with anticipation. For Monsieur Poirot, if he dares to accept the final movement. Inside, a single line in exquisite script. "Midnight, Jardin des Tuileries, beneath the statue of Apollo, alone." There was no signature, no hint of identity, only the invitation to a rendezvous that reeked of challenge. "I must go alone," Poirot said, his voice the very embodiment of calm resolve. "The ghost wishes to speak, not to parley with a crowd, but to confront the mind that pursues him." At the appointed hour, cloaked in shadow, Poirot arrived beneath the cold gaze of Apollo. The garden was a theatre of silence, the moonlight casting sharp silhouettes across gravel and stone. From the darkness came a voice, smooth and deliberate, measured like the ticking of a finely crafted watch. "Monsieur Poirot?" The figure remained concealed in shadow, a silhouette carved against the pale marble. "You have observed closely," the voice began, "and deduced much. Yet you see only the surface, the choreography. You have not grasped the design. Poirot's gaze was steady. Enlighten me then. There is no grandeur in petty theft, no glory in mere pilfering, the figure said, voice cold as steel. My ambition is monumental, to execute a crime of such scale, such precision, that it will redefine the art of the impossible, a theft so audacious that it will echo through history. Poirot inclined his head, intrigued. And the clues, the coins, the tunnels? Deliberate markers, not mistakes. Tests, invitations. I do not hide because I fear capture. I hide because I delight in the chase. The mind is the ultimate prey. And what of your next act? Poirot's eyes gleamed beneath the moonlight. What stage awaits? The shadowed figure stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Poirot's ears. Beneath Paris's heart lies a vault untouched for a century, not merely a repository of wealth, but a fortress of secrets. To breach it is to seize the crown jewel of finance. It is the final crescendo, the heist that will immortalize me. Poirot's expression hardened, the weight of the revelation settling upon him. You play a dangerous game. The figure's laugh was soft, almost regretful. Indeed, but I play it well. Monsieur Poirot, you are the only one who has truly challenged me. Consider this your summons to the ultimate performance. Before he could step forward, the shadow dissolved into the mists, leaving only the faint echo of footsteps and a promise hanging in the chilled night air. Poirot returned to our rooms, his eyes alight with a rare fire. Have you learned anything? Ah, Hastings, mon ami. What we discern thus far, it is more or less a portrait of clarity. This man, he is of education, n'est-ce pas? His speech so refined, his French, parfait, yet with a subtle accent that eludes even Poirot, suggesting tutors of the highest caliber. There must have been, I deduce, a scandal, perhaps, or difficulties financières, something indeed to transform a gentleman into a criminal. But of this I am certain, Hastings. The finale it approaches. We confront not merely a thief, none but a maestro of crime, a composer of chaos. We must be prepared, mon ami. Chapter 6. The Final Movement. The revelation from the mysterious meeting lingered in Poirot's mind like a haunting refrain. The vault beneath Paris's heart, a fortress of secrets, untouched for a century. What treasure could be so valuable, so guarded, that even the Golden Ghost's legend paled beside it? The morning found us at the offices of the Banque de France, an austere monument of stone and iron that dominated the Place de la République. Inspector Giraud had arranged a discreet audience with the vault's curator, a stern man named Monsieur Lefebvre. The curator's eyes betrayed little as he guided us through the labyrinthine corridors beneath the bank, his voice steady, but measured with pride. This vault, Lefebvre explained, is unlike any other in France, or indeed Europe. Built during the reign of Napoleon III, it was designed not only to store gold bullion, but to safeguard state documents, diplomatic treaties, and artifacts of immense historical importance. For decades it remained untouched, for fear of disturbing the fragile equilibrium of power it represented. Poirot listened intently, absorbing every detail. And the security. Impenetrable, monsieur. Thick walls, vault doors weighted with iron and bronze, and a system of mechanical locks, some dating back over 100 years, others modernized in recent decades. But what makes it truly formidable? Dating back over 100 years, others modernized in recent decades. But what makes it truly formidable, Lefebvre added, lowering his voice, is its secrecy. Few know its exact location or the means to access it. Giraud exchanged a look with Poirot. So the Golden Ghost's claim is no idle boast, Poirot murmured. To breach this vault would be to challenge the very foundations of power in France. But what does he intend to steal? I asked. Gold? Documents? Something else entirely? The curator hesitated, then spoke carefully. Among the vault's contents is a collection of uncirculated French bonds, worth a fortune to the right buyer. More intriguing, however, is a dossier marked confidential, rumored to contain evidence of political intrigues and financial scandals dating back decades, enough to ruin lives and topple careers. Poirot's fingers twitched with anticipation. A prize beyond mere gold, then. Power, leverage, chaos. He turned to Giraud. The ghost's game is not simply theft. It is destabilization. He wishes to wield this secret knowledge as a weapon. The inspector nodded grimly. We must anticipate his move, Monsieur Poirot. He is already planning his approach. Time is short. Back at Hotel Meurice, Poirot pored over blueprints and historical maps, cross-referencing details from the archives with reports from Giraud's informants. Each fragment revealed a complex web of tunnels, hidden passages, and forgotten service routes beneath the city, the subterranean network the ghost could exploit. Hastings, Poirot said at last, eyes bright with clarity. The final movement begins not at the vault itself, but here, beneath the city, where the old and new converge. He pointed to a disused sewer line near the bank, a faint inscription marking an access hatch long concealed by a busy street market. The ghost plans to enter unseen through the veins of Paris herself. As the clock ticked relentlessly onward, I felt the weight of the chase tighten around us. The greatest heist in history was imminent, and we were poised on the edge of its unfolding. By nightfall, the sky had turned the color of tarnished silver, and a dry wind stirred the dust along Rue du Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The city above remained unaware, its cafes and boulevards humming with evening laughter and clinking glasses. But below, in the labyrinth beneath Paris, a different drama was beginning. Poirot stood at the edge of the iron grate that concealed the old sewer entrance, flanked by Giraud and two armed officers. We had moved quietly, under cover of darkness, using the old access tunnels that Lefebvre confirmed had once linked directly to the foundation of the Banque de France during its early construction. The iron bars groaned open under Giraud's crowbar. The scent that met us was one of stagnant water and damp stone. Poirot, ever fastidious, stepped forward with a handkerchief pressed neatly to his nose, but his expression was alert, the mind within working like a fine-tuned mechanism. "C'est ici," he whispered. "The game commences." We advanced slowly through the narrow, dripping corridor. Our lanterns carved flickering arcs across brickwork that hadn't seen light in a century. There were signs, subtle but unmistakable, of recent disturbance. Dislodged mortar, faint boot prints in the silt, even a length of fresh cord tied as a guide along the passage wall. We were following the ghost's trail now, but Poirot moved as though he already knew the final act. "Hastings," he said quietly, "observe how this is not rushed. It is elegant, planned with care. He is already inside the vault or very near it." We came upon a junction. One passage descended further, a service conduit meant originally for steam, now dry and dormant. Poirot hesitated. Then he said, almost to himself, "He has timed this precisely. The market above. It closes at 10. By 11, the street will be silent. He will emerge, bypassing every gate and sensor, from below." He turned to Giraud. "There is a maintenance hatch under the Rue du Marché. You must seal it. Now post your men above and below. Do not let him vanish back into the dark." Giraud nodded and disappeared into the tunnel with two of his men. Poirot and I pressed forward, down into the older depths, where the very air seemed to thicken with secrecy. And then we heard it, the faint hiss of welding, the soft metallic grind. Poirot held up a hand. We extinguished our lamp and crept forward. Through a crack in the brickwork ahead, we saw it, the interior of the outer vault wall, breached with surgical precision. Two figures moved within, one hunched near the lock mechanism, the other watching silently, their face obscured by a black silk mask. Poirot leaned close and whispered, "Only one of them matters." It was the ghost. Even masked, there was something unmistakable about the bearing, poised, exact, almost theatrical in his stillness. But then, as if he sensed our presence, he turned. For one split second our eyes met. He didn't flee, he merely inclined his head in a gesture of acknowledgement, as if to say, "You are almost worthy." And then, chaos, a blinding flash, a smoke bomb. Poirot surged forward, but the room filled with choking haze. When we reached the breach, the gullet was gone, the second man unconscious, handcuffed by Giraud's officers a moment later. The vault had not yet been opened. The final lock remained untouched. Poirot stood in the swirling smoke, gaze steady on the silence left behind. "Non, mon ami. He was not here to complete the task this night," he declared with certainty. "He sought merely to demonstrate his prowess. This Hastings was not the true heist." I stared at him, confused. "Then, what was this?" Poirot's lips pressed together in a thin line. "A rehearsal." Chapter 7. The Last Illusion. The following morning was curiously bright, as though Paris had no knowledge of the shadow that nearly breached its beating heart. From the windows of the Hôtel Meurice, I watched the carriages pass, the distant glitter of the Seine, the ordinary splendor of a city unaware it had nearly lost a fortune in secrets and gold. Poirot sat immaculately dressed at the writing desk, sipping chocolate chaud with careful deliberation. Spread before him were papers, architectural sketches, schedules, coded letters, and a sealed envelope marked Archives Privées. He had not spoken much since our descent into the vault's underbelly, but now he looked up with that unmistakable gleam behind his eyes. "My dear Hastings," he said softly, "our adversary is magnificent." "Magnificent?" I exclaimed. "Magnificent!" I exclaimed. "He nearly emptied the vault of the Banque de France." "No," Poirot corrected gently. "He nearly convinced the world he would, but he did not, because he did not intend to. Not yet." He tapped a sketch of the bank's foundations. The entire operation was designed for one purpose: to measure our response time, to learn the habits of the police, to see how quickly Monsieur Giraud mobilizes men where they post guards, how thoroughly they search. It was not the crime, it was the dress rehearsal for it. A silence fell between us. "And now," I said, "he knows everything." Poirot folded his hands and gave the faintest smile. "Almost everything." It was midday when we returned to the Banque de France, this time with greater urgency. Poirot's request was unusual: to inspect the unused vault, a secondary chamber installed beneath the main one in the 1890s, never brought into service and nearly forgotten. Monsieur Lefebvre guided us down, frowning. "There is nothing there, Monsieur Poirot. It is sealed and empty." "That," said Poirot, "is precisely what I fear may no longer be true." The chamber's entrance was protected by an old steel door, its mechanisms rusted with time. Lefebvre struggled with the key, but at last it swung open with a groan. Inside was dust, silence, emptiness. But Poirot's gaze went directly to the floor. The dust had been disturbed, faint tracks, erased by care but not invisible to his keen eye. He crouched, reached forward and pressed a loose tile. A soft click sounded, and a section of the wall behind us shifted inward, a hidden recess. Within it, tools, 2 sets of uniforms, each marked with faint traces of coal dust, and a small oilskin pouch containing detailed maps of the Banque de France's subterranean infrastructure. Every entry, corridor, escape route, and patrol schedule had been drawn with obsessive precision. Poirot examined them in silence, his brow furrowed deeply. "He had no intention of robbing the vault this week," he said finally. "This was reconnaissance, pure and disciplined." Every move was meant to test the fault lines, to study not only the building, but its defenders. This was no heist, Hastings. It was an anatomy lesson. Gerard entered the chamber with purposeful stride, the hem of his coat trailing dust behind him. In his hand, he clutched a brief typewritten report, the edges crumpled from his grip. "We've identified the man apprehended last night," he said without preamble. "One of the two you encountered at the vault, the unconscious one. He's conscious now, but tight-lipped. Calls himself Etienne Lamour. A petty thief, trained safecracker, ex-military engineer. No priors outside Marseille, but I suspect he's been in service to someone far cleverer than himself." Poirot took the report with a delicate nod and scanned it quickly, then looked up with narrowed eyes. "Etienne," he murmured. "Yes. A technician. He was never meant to get away. He is the discardable piece in the puzzle." Giraud raised an eyebrow. "You mean the ghost sacrificed him?" "Not sacrificed, used. The ghost knew we were closing in. He allowed Etienne to be caught. His escape plan accounted for the possibility of losing a man, perhaps even depended on it." He handed the report back to Giraud. "Search his clothing, his pockets, even the hem of his coat. If the ghost left anything behind, it will be on him." Giraud gave a grudging nod and turned to leave. Poirot paused, then added, "And Inspecteur? He did not resist arrest, did he?" "No," Giraud said, turning slightly. "He was dazed, confused. Smoke inhalation, perhaps. Looked more betrayed than afraid." "He will not speak. Not because of loyalty, but because he was told very little. That is the genius of our adversary. He does not depend on crust, only design. Each accomplice is a single gear, moving precisely as instructed, never knowing the whole machine." I stepped forward, struggling with a question. "But if he's gathered all this knowledge, prepared such a scheme, what now? Does he abandon it?" "No," Poirot said. "He delays it. He reshapes it. The path to the vault is no longer viable. We have disrupted his foundation. But he will build again, elsewhere perhaps, or with new hands. The true plan, the final target, has yet to be revealed." Giraud looked unconvinced. "So he simply disappears?" "For now, yes," Poirot replied. "But his failure here will not defeat him. It will instruct him." We emerged into the late afternoon light. The rain had stopped, and the city glittered faintly beneath the thinning clouds. Life went on as before. Carriages clattered down the boulevards, and the cafes buzzed with idle conversation. But somewhere, deep beneath the surface of Paris, a man moved unseen, calculating, adjusting. Back at the Hotel Meurice, Poirot sat in the quiet of our suite, watching the city from the balcony. I joined him, unable to shake the lingering chill of the vault. "What will you do now?" I asked. He did not answer at once. Instead, he took a letter from his breast pocket, creased and faintly perfumed, and unfolded it. "There exists a safe, mon ami," he declared at last, "hidden within the vaults beneath the Banque Royale in Brussels, fortified a mere 3 years past. Some whisper it is now impossible to breach, a challenge most formidable." "You think that's his next target?" "I think," Poirot said, "that the game has shifted to a new board, and I intend to follow." He rose, smoothed his cuffs, and gave me a rare, sombre smile. "Viens, Hastings. Let us savor this evening, mon ami. Tomorrow we embark anew." And as the lamps of Paris flickered to life, I knew with certainty this was not the end. The golden ghost was still out there, silent, brilliant, watching, but so was Poirot, and somewhere soon they would meet again. As Paris slumbers, Hercule Poirot's pursuit of the golden ghost fades into the city's mist, the thief's shadow ever elusive. The gentleman thief closes with a challenge unmet, a duel destined to resume. We hope this dance of intellect has captivated you. Did the ghost's riddles ensnare you, or did you glimpse his next move?